No badge, no seat. Lieutenant Connor Blake said it before the old man could place one hand on the back of the chair. The National Military Heritage Gala had not officially begun, but the ballroom already moved like a machine built from polished brass, dress uniforms, donor smiles, camera flashes, and quiet money. Crystal chandeliers spilled gold light over the Arlington Grand Hotel. American flags stood behind the stage, and a string quartet played beneath black and white photographs of soldiers whose names most guests had never learned. At the center of the front row sat the honor table. 3 empty chairs waited behind 3 brass nameplates. General Thomas Art Ellison. General Jack Moreland. General Henry Voss. Samuel Whitaker stood in front of those names with a small wooden box held against his chest. He was 86 years old, narrow in the shoulders, clean-shaven, and dressed in a navy suit old enough to shine at the elbows. His black tie sat a little crooked. His shoes were polished, but the heels were worn down from years of walking more than riding. He wore no medals. No service cap rested under his arm. No escort stood beside him. In that ballroom, where importance arrived with aids, ribbons, and assigned seating, Samuel looked like a man who had wandered in through the wrong door. Connor Blake stepped between Samuel and the honor table. He was 28, sharp in his dress uniform, straight-backed, and careful with every motion. He had been placed in charge of protocol, and protocol made sense to him. It had lists, badges, guest categories, and rules that did not bend just because an old man carried a box like it was a piece of his own heart. "Sir," Connor said, "this table is reserved for honorees, senior families, and invited distinguished guests. General admission is behind the media riser." Samuel did not look at the rear of the room. His pale blue eyes remained on the 3 brass nameplates. "I know who it is reserved for," he said. The voice was low and worn. It did not ask for pity. It did not push. It simply landed. Connor gave him a practiced smile, the kind young officers use when they believe patience is the same as respect. Then, "You understand why you cannot stand here." Samuel tightened his hands around the wooden box once, only once. "I need to leave this before they sit down." Connor looked at the box. It was wrapped in brown cloth and tied with a faded length of field cord. It had no plaque, no donor ribbon, no polished label. It looked like something pulled from a closet after too many years of dust and silence. "Personal items go through event staff," Connor said. "They do not go on the head table. It is not personal." "Then what is it?" Samuel did not answer. A woman at the next table glanced over. 2 young officers near the aisle paused with programs in their hands. A photographer turned his lens slightly downward, waiting to see whether the old man would become a problem worth documenting. Connor noticed the attention. It bothered him. He opened the seating chart on his tablet and ran one finger down the list. Name: Samuel Whitaker. Connor searched. His face showed nothing at first. Then it settled into confirmation. "You are not listed at the honor table." "I did not say I was." "Then why are you trying to approach it?" Samuel looked at the 3 chairs again. "Because Thomas asked me to." Connor's smile tightened. "General Ellison." "Thomas," Samuel said. The single name carried more history than the rank. Connor held out his hand. "Do you have an invitation?" Samuel reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and removed a cream-colored envelope, softened at the corners from being opened and closed too many times. He handed it over with the care of a man giving up something fragile. Connor read the handwriting on the front. "Sam, you promised you would come. Bring the box. T. No printed seal. No bar code. No registration number. No formal title." Connor lifted the envelope so the nearby staff could see it. "Sir, this is not a credential." Samuel looked at him without blinking. It was enough when he wrote it. That brought a small murmur from the nearest table. Someone whispered, maybe he is confused. Another voice, softer, said, poor man. Samuel heard both. He had heard worse in quieter places. He did not turn his head. Connor lowered his voice, but not enough to hide the irritation beneath it. Mr. Whitaker, I am trying to prevent embarrassment. The men seated here are former 4-star generals receiving a lifetime service award. They cannot be approached by every guest with a memory and a keepsake. Samuel looked down at the box. His thumbs rested over the faded field cord. It is not a keepsake, he said. Connor stepped closer. Then open it. The words were firm. Not cruel. Not loud. But the surrounding guests felt the change. A small circle formed around the honor table, the way embarrassment forms in expensive rooms, quietly dressed as curiosity. Samuel's eyes moved to Connor's hand. Do not touch that, he said. The quartet kept playing. Glassware glimmered. Waiters passed behind them with trays of iced water. But something inside the ballroom had gone still. Connor held his hand in the air for half a second, then drew it back. He told himself it was restraint. He told himself he was protecting 3 retired generals from an unverified item. Megan Carter saw the moment from the registration stand. She was the gala operations manager, calm under pressure, and already tired from solving problems no guest would ever notice. All of those problems had been easy compared to the stillness around the old man. Megan had grown up with a father who never called himself a hero and never stood when people made speeches about heroes. He had been a Marine. He had a quiet limp and a drawer of letters tied with green string. He had taught her one thing about old soldiers: when they became silent, listen harder. She left the registration stand and walked toward the honor table. Connor saw her coming and squared his shoulders. Megan, this is under control. She looked at Samuel first. Then at the box. Then at the envelope in Connor's hand. Is it? Connor's jaw moved once. We have an unverified guest attempting to place an uninspected object near the principals. Samuel did not defend himself. That was what struck Megan. Most people argued when they were being pushed out of a room. Samuel did not. He only held the box as if it had been entrusted to him by men who could no longer speak without it. Mr. Whitaker. Megan asked, who invited you tonight? Thomas Ellison. Connor corrected him automatically. General Ellison. Samuel turned his eyes toward the nameplate. He was Thomas before he was general. That answer changed the air around the table. Megan took the envelope and read it again. Sam, you promised you would come. Bring the box. Where did you get this? She asked. My mailbox, Samuel said. 3 weeks ago. No confirmation call. No printed ticket. No, Connor lifted his eyebrows as if the case had closed itself. Exactly. Samuel lowered the box a few inches. His hands were steady, but the veins stood out beneath the thin skin. He wrote it by hand because he knew I would understand. Connor gave a short, controlled breath. Sir, that may be meaningful to you, but it is not how formal military events work. He turned slightly and signaled to a security attendant near the wall. Please assist Mr. Whitaker to the lobby until we can verify his status. The security attendant started across the marble floor with the uneasy steps of a man obeying an order he did not enjoy. Megan lifted one hand. Wait. Connor looked at her. For what? To confirm the invitation. There is no invitation. Then it will take 2 minutes to prove that. The argument was reasonable, which made it inconvenient. Connor hesitated, then pointed toward the box. Fine. But the box has to be inspected. Samuel's face changed for the first time. Not anger. Not fear. Something older than both passed behind his eyes. Megan noticed. Maybe we should call Colonel Pierce first, she said. Connor did not look away from Samuel. "Open the box, Mr. Whitaker." Samuel stood very still. Then he looked toward the 3 empty chairs as if asking permission from men not yet in the room. Slowly, he untied the field cord. The brown cloth folded back. The wooden lid lifted. Inside, resting on dark velvet worn flat by time, were 4 objects. A brass compass with a cracked glass face. A folded piece of waterproof map paper, soft at the creases, marked in faded pencil. A darkened dog tag on a broken chain. And a yellowed carbon copy of an old report page, its top corner stamped with a word that had been crossed out so hard the paper had almost torn. Connor stared at the objects. "That is what this is about." Samuel said nothing. Connor leaned closer. "These are old field items. They still need to be cleared." "What is Valley Echo?" she asked softly. Samuel's eyes closed for one breath. "A place," he said. "That is all." Connor reached in and picked up the compass between his thumb and forefinger. The cracked glass caught the chandelier light and split it into thin lines. Samuel's voice dropped. "Put it back." Connor looked up. "Mr. Whitaker, I am not damaging it. The needle faces the map." Connor frowned. "What?" "The needle faces the map," Samuel repeated. "Always." A small laugh came from one of the young officers near the aisle. Connor heard it and stiffened. He set the compass back with more care than before, but his irritation had sharpened. You cannot hold up a national gala over the direction of a broken compass. The word broken reached Samuel like a hand closing around an old wound. His gaze fixed on the compass. For a moment, he was not in the Arlington Grand Hotel. He was 23 years old again, soaked through, kneeling in red mud beneath a sky that had disappeared behind rain. The valley had never had an official name. On paper it was only a blank fold of green and brown in a place most men in the command tent spoke about as if geography were simple. To the 4 men who survived it, it became Valley Echo, because every sound came back wrong. A snapped twig returned as a rifle bolt. A whisper became a warning. Rain hit the leaves so hard the whole world hissed. Staff Sergeant Samuel Whitaker had carried that compass in his left hand, the map in his right, and 3 young officers behind him who were too exhausted to admit how afraid they were. Thomas Ellison had been a captain then, stubborn, proud, and trying not to lean on anybody. Jack Moreland had been a lieutenant with a map case under his jacket and mud on his teeth from a fall he refused to mention. Henry Voss had been the youngest, quiet and pale, watching the ridge behind them as if the valley itself might close and erase their tracks. The mission had gone wrong in ways no official report liked to describe. The radio failed first. Then the planned route vanished under floodwater. Then the landmarks on the approved map stopped matching the ground beneath their boots. Ellison had turned to Samuel in the rain and said, "Whitaker, are you certain this is east?" Samuel had looked at the compass, then at the creek cutting black lines through the mud, then at the slope of the trees bending under storm wind. "Compass says east," he had answered. "Water says southeast. We follow the water until it bends." Moreland had tried to smile. "You trust a creek over the United States Army map?" Samuel had kept moving. "Tonight I trust anything that still knows where it is going." That was not bravery the way speeches described it. It was smaller and harder. One step. Then another. A hand on Ellison's sleeve near a ravine. A quiet order for Voss to breathe slower. Moreland's dog tag wrapped in Samuel's pocket after the chain snapped. A compass cracked against stone when Samuel fell to one knee and shielded the map with his body. The glass broke. The needle still moved. Samuel tapped it once. Still breathing. By dawn, they reached the extraction point with no music, no flag, no applause, and no clean story anyone wanted to tell. There was a canvas cover, a field desk, and a report form that had no room for the truth. Ellison had argued first. His name goes in the record. Moreland had unfolded the ruined map and pointed to the path Samuel had chosen through creek beds and ridgelines. Voss had gripped the edge of the desk with both hands and said, "Without Staff Sergeant Whitaker, none of us comes out." The officer behind the desk did not look cruel. That almost made it worse. He looked like a man serving a machine larger than himself. The route was classified. The valley had no approved designation. The mission would be summarized in language clean enough to erase mud, fear, and one sergeant's judgment. Samuel's name did not go into the final version. The compass did not become evidence. The map disappeared from the record. The dog tag went back into Moreland's hand. Before they separated, Ellison had pressed the broken compass into Samuel's palm. Moreland folded the map around it. Voss tied the field cord over the box with fingers still shaking from cold and relief. "We will fix this," Ellison said. "Someday," Moreland added. Voss had looked Samuel straight in the eye. "You have our word." Samuel, young enough to still believe time was generous, had given them the answer men give when they do not expect to be remembered. Live long enough to make it matter. The ballroom returned as light, music, and Connor Blake's impatient voice. "Mr. Whitaker, I am going to ask you one final time to step away from the honor table." Samuel looked down at the box. "I waited 53 years, he said. "I can wait 2 more minutes." The line did not land loudly. It landed deeply. Megan heard it. So did the security attendant. So did the officers at the aisle, though one of them suddenly stopped smiling. Connor did not like the direction of the room. He looked at Megan. "Call whoever you need to call. But he waits in the lobby." "No," Samuel said. Connor turned back. "I am not asking." Samuel lifted his eyes. "Neither am I." For the first time, the old man's voice carried steel. It did not last. He did not repeat it. He did not step forward or raise his chin. But the room felt it. A few conversations died at the nearby tables. Megan moved fast now. She took the envelope and walked behind the registration curtain, dialing the number on the emergency contact sheet for Colonel Andrew Pierce, retired, senior aide to General Ellison. The phone rang once. Twice. A crisp male voice answered. "Pierce. Colonel Pierce, this is Megan Carter with Gala Operations. I am sorry to interrupt, but we have a guest at the honor table claiming a personal invitation from General Ellison." Name: Samuel Whitaker. The line went silent. Not dead. Silent. Megan looked through the gap in the curtain. Samuel stood alone in a small circle of judgment, the box open on the table edge, Connor between him and the 3 empty chairs. "Colonel," she said. Pierce's voice returned lower. "Say the name again." "Samuel Whitaker. He has a handwritten envelope from TE and a wooden box marked Valley Echo." This time the silence felt like a door opening in a room far away. "Where is he?" "At the honor table. Lieutenant Blake is trying to move him to the lobby." "Do not let that happen." The words came fast and stripped of ceremony. "Miss Carter, listen to me carefully. Keep him there. Do not touch the box. Do not let anyone else touch it. I am going to General Ellison now." The call ended. Megan stood still for 1 second, the phone warm in her hand. Then she came back through the curtain with a different expression. Connor noticed. "What did they say?" Megan looked at him, then at Samuel. "They said nobody touches the box." Connor's face tightened. "Who said that?" Before Megan could answer, the doors to the private reception room opened. The quartet faltered on a note. 3 old men stepped into the ballroom. General Thomas R. Ellison came first, silver-haired, broad-shouldered even with age, his tuxedo jacket open as if he had forgotten the ceremony waiting for him. General Jack Morland followed with his glasses in one hand and the stunned face of a man who had seen a ghost and recognized himself beside it. General Henry Voss came last, hard-faced, silent, moving like emotion itself had been ordered to stay behind his eyes and failed. Colonel Pierce walked half a step behind them. The effect moved through the room like wind across a flag line. Conversations faded near the stage first, then at the center tables, then near the registration area. Waiters froze with plates in hand. The photographer lowered his camera, then lifted it again with trembling care. The three generals did not walk toward the stage. They did not walk toward the master of ceremonies. They walked directly toward Samuel Whitaker. Connor turned and saw them coming. His posture changed by inches, certainty draining into confusion. Ellison stopped 3 feet from Samuel. For a moment, he did not speak. He looked at the box, the cracked compass, the folded map, the dog tag, and the old report page. Then he looked at Samuel's hands. Age had thinned them. But Ellison remembered those hands pulling him out of red mud before the ravine took him. "Staff Sergeant Whitaker," Ellison said, his voice rough, "you found your way back to us." A ripple moved through the crowd. Staff Sergeant. Not walk-in. Not unverified guest. Not problem. Staff Sergeant. Samuel looked at the 3 men before him. His face stayed controlled, but his eyes changed. A man can lock a door for 53 years and still feel it open in 1 second. Morland stepped closer, but he did not touch the items inside the box. He only bowed his head toward the map. "I thought that was gone." Samuel's mouth moved toward the smallest smile. "You told me to keep it dry." Morland gave a breath that was almost laughter and almost grief. "I should have told you to keep yourself easier to find." "I moved around," Samuel said. Voss stared at the dog tag. His throat worked once. "That chain broke on the north slope," he said. Samuel nodded. "You asked me to hold it until morning." Voss looked at him. "And you did." 3 words, plain and heavy. Connor stood half a step behind them, the envelope still in his hand. He had become smaller without moving. Ellison turned toward him. "Lieutenant Blake." Connor straightened. "Yes, General." Ellison's voice remained calm. "That made it worse. The man you were about to remove from this room is the reason I lived long enough to wear this jacket. No regulation could answer that. No seating chart could survive it." Connor opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Ellison took the envelope from Connor's hand and placed it gently beside the box. Then he turned to the crowd. The master of ceremonies began to step forward, but Ellison raised one hand without looking at him. The master of ceremonies stopped. Ellison reached for the microphone at the honor table. Before he spoke, he faced Samuel, brought his heels together, and raised his right hand in a salute. Morland followed. Voss followed. 3 retired 4-star generals stood at attention before an old man in a worn navy suit. The room understood before anyone explained. Chairs scraped softly. A Navy captain stood first. Then a gray-haired Marine near table 6. Then donors who no longer looked sure what to do with their champagne glasses. Then staff. Then families. Within seconds, the ballroom was on its feet. Samuel did not salute back at once. His hands rested on the box. His eyes moved over the room, over the faces that had dismissed him, pitied him, doubted him, watched him like a problem. Then he looked at Megan Carter, who was standing near the registration curtain with tears in her eyes she made no attempt to hide. He looked at Connor Blake, whose face had gone pale with the knowledge that rules are not the same thing as judgment. Samuel lifted his right hand. It was not sharp. Age had taken the snap from the motion. But no young officer in that room carried more weight. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Ellison lowered his hand and spoke into the microphone. Before any man at this table accepts an award tonight, the record must be corrected. The word record changed everything. The crowd stayed standing. Ellison turned slightly toward the large screen behind the stage. 53 years ago, Captain Thomas Ellison, Lieutenant Jack Moreland, and Lieutenant Henry Voss walked out of a valley that did not appear on any public map. For decades, the official summary credited command decisions, weather windows, and extraction timing. He paused. That summary was incomplete. Moreland stepped beside him and unfolded a sheet from inside his jacket. His hands shook, but his voice did not. Last month, after the final review of the Valley Echo file, we received permission to speak one sentence that should have been written a lifetime ago. Guidance under hostile weather conditions provided by unnamed enlisted personnel. Moreland looked at Samuel. That unnamed enlisted personnel was Staff Sergeant Samuel Whitaker. The room was silent now in a way Samuel had only heard at gravesides. Voss took the microphone. He guided us when the map failed. He kept Captain Ellison from going over a ravine. He carried my radio battery when I could no longer feel my hands. He held Lieutenant Moreland's dog tag until morning because a frightened young officer needed to believe something from home would make it out. Voss stopped and forced the next words through. And he never once asked us to call him a hero. Ellison looked down at the box. Tonight, with the approval of the review board and in the presence of the National Military Heritage Foundation, the archive accepts these objects as official Valley Echo evidence. The corrected record will carry his name. A woman near the front covered her mouth. The young officer who had laughed earlier stared at the floor. Connor Blake stepped forward then. He did not do it because anyone ordered him. He removed his service cap, held it at his side, and faced Samuel. Staff Sergeant Whitaker, Connor said, voice tight, I was wrong. I treated a man like paperwork. I am sorry. The apology did not erase what he had done, but it kept the room from turning him into a villain. Samuel seemed to understand that. He looked at Connor for a long second. Then he said, next time, ask before you measure a man. Connor swallowed. Yes, Staff Sergeant. Megan brought a chair from the honor table, but Samuel did not sit yet. Ellison lifted the brass nameplate from the center of the table, the one meant for the Lifetime Service Award display, and turned it over. On the underside was a second plate, covered by black felt. He peeled the felt away with careful fingers. The cameras caught it. So did the crowd. Staff Sergeant Samuel Whitaker. Moreland gave a small breath. We had it made, he said. We were afraid you would not come. Samuel looked at the nameplate. For the first time that night, his hand trembled. Not much. Just enough. Ellison saw it and lowered his voice so only Samuel and the microphone caught part of it. You told us to live long enough to make it matter. Samuel's eyes stayed on his name. You took your time. A low laugh moved through the ballroom, gentle and relieved. Ellison nodded. Yes, he said. We did. Then, in front of everyone, he picked up the cracked compass with both hands, not by the edges, not like an object, but like a witness. This compass brought 3 officers home, he said. But that is not why it matters most. He placed it before Samuel's nameplate. It matters because the man who carried it did not leave anyone behind, even after the record left him behind. Samuel lowered his head. The room remained standing. Moreland placed the folded map beside the compass. Voss placed the dog tag beside the map. Then Ellison took the old report copy from the box and set a new corrected page next to it. The old line remained visible. The new line was printed beneath it. Navigation, extraction guidance, and survival leadership were provided by Staff Sergeant Samuel Whitaker. Samuel read it once. Then again. The second time, his eyes blurred. He did not wipe them. Old soldiers often learn to hide pain. Sometimes they hide relief the same way. Ellison leaned toward the microphone one last time. Gentlemen and ladies, tonight's first honor does not go to the men whose names were printed in the program. It goes to the man whose name was missing. No one needed instruction. The applause began at the back of the room, not loud at first, then rising, filling the chandeliers, the white tablecloths, the silver chargers, the stage, the flags, the space where shame had stood a few minutes before. Samuel finally sat in the center chair. Not behind the sound booth. Not in the lobby. At the honor table, where the wooden box rested open before him and his name shone in brass. Connor Blake stood near the aisle, silent and rigid. Megan watched him, then watched Samuel. She knew enough about veterans to know that the apology mattered less than the lesson. Some doors should be guarded. But not by men who only know how to read badges. At the end of the ceremony, Samuel stayed at the table with the box open in front of him. Ellison sat on his left. Moreland sat on his right. Voss stood behind them with one hand on the chair, still unable to sit comfortably with his own memories. Megan approached quietly. Staff Sergeant Whitaker, she said, the Foundation would be honored to preserve the box exactly as you kept it. Samuel looked at the compass. For 53 years, it had lived in dresser drawers, footlockers, rented rooms, and one small apartment where his wife, Ruth, used to touch the lid and say, "One day they will remember you, Sam." He had always answered, "They remember enough." She had known better. Samuel placed one hand over the box. "Keep the needle facing the map," he said. Megan nodded. "Always." That answer seemed to satisfy him. Connor stepped forward one last time. Stopping at a respectful distance. He held the cream envelope in both hands. "I believe this belongs to you." Samuel looked at it, then at Ellison. Ellison smiled faintly. "No," Samuel said. "Put it in the box." Connor obeyed. The envelope went beside the corrected record, the cracked compass, the folded map, and the dog tag. A handwritten promise. A broken instrument. A missing name. A record finally repaired. Samuel closed the lid, tied the faded field cord once more, and rested his palm on top. The ballroom lights reflected softly in the brass nameplate before him. Staff Sergeant Samuel A. Whitaker. Outside the hotel, traffic moved through Arlington like any other Friday night. The world did what it always does after an old debt is paid. It kept moving. But inside the ballroom, men who had spent their lives saluting rank had stood for something older than rank. Samuel Whitaker did not give a speech. When Megan asked whether he wanted to say a few words for the archive camera, he thought for a long moment, then looked toward the three generals. "They kept their word," he said. That was all. It was enough. Years later, visitors to the National Military Heritage Archive would stop in front of a small glass case labeled Valley Echo. Inside sat a cracked compass angled toward a faded map, a dog tag, a handwritten envelope, and a corrected report page. Some visitors read the whole display. Some only glanced. But veterans, especially old ones, tended to stand there longer. They understood what the young sometimes miss. A man can be overlooked by the record and still carry the truth. A promise can arrive late and still arrive clean. And sometimes the most important name in a room is the one nobody printed on the list. The compass never moved again. It did not need to. After 53 years, the room had finally found north.